If it's Thursday, it's the economy. President Biden touts better than expected GDP growth amid growing recession fears, as Democrats face an increasingly uphill battle in their fight to keep control of Congress. Plus, Democrats respond to GOP attacks on the issue of crime, as the Bidens, Obama, Liz Cheney, and Trump all gear up to hit the trail, stumping for candidates in crucial races. And 5 years later, new reporting on the future of the MeToo movement, in particular, Gen Z. They speak out on the movement's impacts and early legacy. Hello there. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Chuck Todd. As Democrats race to avoid losing the House and possibly the Senate, the White House's East and West wings appear to be moving into economic damage control mode. President Biden has hit the road to try to reassure anxious voters about the state of the economy and that he is actually focused on dealing with it, as the First Lady prepares to hit the campaign trail in an effort to boost some high-profile Democratic incumbents who find themselves fighting for their own political lives. All of this comes as Democrats are trying to regain that lost midterm momentum from September, in large part due to the party's struggles with its messaging around economic issues, but frankly, due to the actual economic data that is sitting out there. It's not just about messaging, it's the economy itself. Today, Democrats did get some welcome headline relief, if you will, thanks to the news that the economy grew faster than expected in the last quarter, with GDP rising by 2.6%. Now, you know, with all of these economic releases, there's always a but, as some economists pointed out. And this but's an important one. When you look under the hood of those numbers, there's still plenty of cause for concern. Consumers are starting to spend less, and everything is costing more. But one of the reasons for this growth is people still have money in their pockets. Now, it's less all the time, but they still do. That said, parts of the housing market are collapsing due to rising mortgage rates. The Federal Reserve tries to fight soaring inflation, potentially tipping the economy into recession. And whether or not they can engineer a so-called soft landing is a question that could impact millions of workers, voters, homeowners, renters around the country. President Biden is trying to address some of those economic concerns this afternoon in upstate New York. Call it a version of I feel your pain type of messaging. We do expect him to speak in a few minutes when he's up there. It's an official visit, but as you know, the state of New York is a hotbed for competitive House races these days, particularly Democratic House seats that are vulnerable. Joining me now outside of the White House is NBC correspondent Josh Lederman. Also with me, CNBC economics editor Jeff Cox. Jason Furman is a former economic advisor from the Obama years. He's a professor of economic policy at Harvard. And we have economist Omer Sharif, founder and president of Inflation Insights. Josh, let me start with you. You know, I still think back to Nancy Pelosi saying 2 weeks ago, hey, we got a message on the economy better in the last 3 weeks. You sit there and you're like, what can you do or say in these final weeks to somehow reassure voters that are not happy about the economy? But what is the White House's plan?
Well, certainly they're going to do everything they can to highlight positive developments like this new GDP report, better than expected, at least for a little bit, easing some of the fears about that big R-word recession that is on the minds of so many voters. But, you know, the reality is they have to play with the cards that they have in this campaign. Those cards are some of these, you know, modest successes, this GDP report, the reduction in gas prices that they have been touting, and some of these, tentative signs that inflation may be easing. But at the end of the day, what they are up against is how people feel about the economy. People are going to be voting more based on whether they feel secure and whether they feel like they're able to afford the things they were in the past than they are by economic reports that get published in the Wall Street Journal. And that is the challenge that Democrats and President Biden on the campaign trail are really up against as they try to sell to Americans steps that they have taken on the economy that so far a lot of people aren't personally feeling in their own pocketbooks.
And selling what they've done, are they talking about any new actions that they may try to take after the election?
Well, certainly they're talking about doing a lot more of the same. It's more about stay the course and allow some of these major pieces of legislation they've already passed to then take effect and be implemented well. And then to contrast that, Chuck, with what President Biden has been saying that Republicans will do on day one if they do take over the House, which is to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. So bring things in the opposite direction. But we haven't heard a full-throated, voicing of a major new economic plan that's coming just on the other side of the election. I think partly because Democrats realize that the chances that they are going to retain both houses of Congress after the election are not that great.
Josh Letterman at the White House for us. Josh, thanks for getting us started. Let me bring in Jeff Cox here. So, Jeff, the GDP number, and it feels like every economic indicator that we get, if it looks good on the top line, there's a but. You got to see this stuff. And if it looks bad on the top line, there's always, hey, but, it's better under here. So these GDP numbers, is this a good headline for a bad economy, or is this a reminder that the economy is better than we think?
Well, Chuck, look, as you say, there's a lot of alchemy and economic voodoo that goes into the way these numbers are formulated. I think if you were looking at this report today for kind of the all clear on the economy, this wasn't that. I mean, there was still a lot of questions that this report raised today. One of the big things is that the headline number boosted almost completely because of a big rise in exports, which were up over 14% on the quarter. That simply is not sustainable. In fact, if you separated and just subtracted out the net export number from this report, it actually would have printed slightly negative. Other areas of concern is that we saw a drop-off in consumer spending, the pace of increase there falling, of course, as prices continue to rise, and residential investment, that just basically means home building. We all know that the real estate market is not doing well right now. Those numbers reflected today. So a lot of questions. And then, of course, on the periphery is the Federal Reserve. They've been moving interest rates up in large increments. They're expected to do that again next week. And that's really scaring a lot of people, scaring the markets.
What are the chances that we're going to have a growth in the fourth quarter? I mean, you're basically have painted a picture that says it's hard to imagine that we would have growth in the fourth quarter, but you tell me.
Most of the economists I speak to, Chuck, are expecting basically a flattish number in the fourth quarter. The one big positive for the economy right now is the jobs market. People are still able to get jobs. Wages are still continuing to rise. So that's a good thing, and that's keeping the economy afloat now. What I'm hearing, though, from most economists is that going into 2023, at some point early, mid-2023, we will, in fact, be in recession.
Jeff Cox from our partners over there at CNBC. Jeff, thank you. Let me bring in our two economists here, Jason Furman, Omer Sharif. You both are pretty blunt speakers here. Jason, let me start with you. Is the Federal Reserve engineering a recession too quickly?
I think that the Fed has this roughly right. They're in a really difficult situation. The job market is really strong, which is terrific. Inflation is way too high. They've done a lot of tightening that only affects the economy with a lag, but it is starting to affect the economy. You just heard the housing number was down quite a lot in Q3. That's partly due to the Fed. So even with the Fed already affecting the economy, inflation hasn't budged.
Yeah.
I think we're going to start to see inflation come down. When it does, they can sort of let off on their interest rate increases and wait and see. But I think they have to see some tangible evidence that inflation comes down before they shift to the wait and see mode.
Omer, is part of the problem here, and the reason why there's been a bit of a lag, even more of a lag maybe than expected, is Americans had too much money, still had plenty of cash to absorb inflation for longer than maybe the Fed thought?
Yeah, look, I think that's certainly part of it when you talk about some of the fiscal stimulus we had in late 2020, early 2021. That certainly contributed to some of the inflation that we're seeing today. I tend to be more on the side of, there was a lot of supply shocks to the economy that I think just stuck with us a lot longer than anybody had really anticipated. And then you had some of these exogenous shocks, like Russia and Ukraine, for example, that's just sort of exacerbated the situation. But I would say that I think, I agree with Jason that as inflation starts to come off, they can probably pause and see where things are headed. Right. I'm of the opinion that that's going to start relatively soon. You talked about housing slowing down. Even the labor market has started to cool off a bit. So I'm on sort of in the camp of let's sort of wrap it up by the end of the year and see where things evolve next year before maybe you run the risk of over tightening.
Yeah, I want to stick to this, Jason, and I know you feel as if the Fed's getting us just right. I think if we didn't have a war and we didn't have Europe on the brink of an energy crisis, maybe that it would feel easier to handle. But how much should that factor into the Fed thinking, look, we've got some issues here in this global economy that are kind of out of our hands, and we need to protect the American economy here a little bit more?
Yeah, look. Part of the inflation we're seeing is because of that war. It is because of food and energy. But if you take food and energy out of it, inflation is running at about a 5% rate. The Fed would like to see it at a 2% rate. I actually don't think that war has impacted that so-called core inflation rate, the ex-food and energy. And so they're about 3 percentage points from where they want to be. Now, that's less far away from where they want to be than the headline. Headline inflation is 8. That says they're way far away. Still 3 points away. 3 points away is going to take a lot more than just, the 3% interest rate that we have right now. That's just not that high an interest rate to deal with that big a problem.
Omer, if we had a functional political system on our legislative branch these days, and the White House and the executive and the legislative branch got along pretty well, how could they help Jay Powell here? How could they help speed up essentially deflation?
I think the most bang for your buck you really get in terms of fiscal policy, I think, is if you want to really have a direct and immediate impact, is really through kind of the medical care system, because they control reimbursement rates to Medicare and Medicaid. That's about 40% of medical care within core inflation. So that's a big part of it. And they set those rates, essentially, the CMS does each year. So that's a pretty direct way to try to slow down the growth of healthcare costs. I mean, the Inflation Reduction Act, I think it's well intended, but it's something that doesn't really kick in till 2025. So you don't really get a lot happening in the near term.
Jason, if you were at this White House, look, your job in the White House was to be the economic truth teller internally. Looking at the situation now, what would you be telling President Biden about how he should be preparing for the next 6 months?
Look, I mean, there is a big picture point here, and it is the truth that a couple months ago, all sorts of people were talking about us being in a recession already. This number obliterates that view. The low unemployment rate obliterates that view. That's not to say there aren't risks going forward. I think there's one thing President Biden is doing really, really well. He's talking about the Fed in a very responsible way, respecting its independence. That avoids
Can you imagine what Donald Trump would?
Turmoil.
I want to interrupt you. I've thought about this, right? If Donald Trump were president right now and the stock market were tanking because of interest rates, how much would he be browbeating Jay Powell?
Exactly. And look at Liz Truss. That's part of why the markets freaked out in the UK, was she campaigned against the Bank of England, and people weren't sure. Should we be looking to the Bank of England? Should we be looking to the government? Which one's calling the shots here? That type of confusion is never good. I think this White House has been excellent on that. I think some additional deficit reduction is the main way they could help on inflation. But, they're not about short-run macro management. I mean, the reality is they should continue to focus on strengthening our economy in the medium and long run. It's just hard to break through with that when everyone just is focused on the short run.
And Omer, internationally, is there anything the United States tried to convince OPEC essentially to soften things a bit in the energy markets. Are there other things that could be done with diplomacy here that might help the economic situation?
I think we've tried to do some stuff internally, the CHIPS Act, to try to bring semiconductor manufacturing closer to home. That could potentially help in the long run. But again, short run, it's hard to see a lot, that they can do to really help on the inflation front. right now, I think it's really the Fed is sort of in the driver's seat when it comes to inflation and what they're able to do there. And just one quick final point I want to make. Yes, you mentioned savings and the lags. But there's also lags in the way that we measure inflation. We've seen the rental market turn down already in the spring by any measure you want to look at. Rent growth has slowed. That's going to show up with the lag in core inflation probably around the spring of this year. That's going to help a lot, I think, in terms of bringing core down next year. And the Fed knows that. And that's another reason why, my preference is to say, look, let's get to sort of 4.5% by the end of the year and take a breather there.
Well, I'm sure the Democrats now wish that the midterm elections were in, I guess it sounds like June of next year when inflation has settled down anywhere. Omer and Jason, really appreciate the two of you offering your expertise for us. Thank you. Coming up, the campaign ad wars. Rising crime and Republican attacks put Democrats on the defensive in particularly 3 key states on this front: Oregon, New York, and California. All of this in the final 12 days before the election. The latest and what it means with my panel next. Plus, new developments from the campaign trail. Democrats scramble to defend a key governor's seat in Battleground, Wisconsin, and Republicans rally around their embattled Senate candidate in Georgia. We'll hit the road. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. It is not just the economy that has Democrats on the defensive 12 days out from the election, as Republicans continue to hit Democrats on the issue of crime on the airwaves, particularly in House races in 3 states that have 3 interesting cities that have had some issues: Portland, Oregon, New York City, and San Francisco. Take a look at our little montage here.
Mark Kelly's made Arizona unsafe. I'm Blake Masters, and I approve this message. Arizona police endorse me because we've got to protect Arizona families.
You're looking at actual violent crimes caught on camera in Kathy Hochul's New York. And it's getting much worse on Kathy Hochul's watch.
And if you're wondering whether these attacks are weighing on Democrats, well, there's a few ways you could tell. Speaker Pelosi circulated a Dear Colleague letter yesterday highlighting her party's commitment to public safety, saying it's Democrats that have taken action in the House to fund the police while ensuring accountability. And speaking of the airways, we're now seeing a lot more Democratic ads that are featuring police officers that play up the Democrat support for law enforcement. Take a look.
The attacks on Sean Patrick Maloney are lies. Sean took on those who wanted to defund the police. He's tough on crime. Sean got us millions to hire and train local police officers, and he passed bipartisan laws to crack down on gun violence.
I know what law enforcement needs to keep people safe. And trust me, Sharice Davids has law enforcement's back, voting for equipment and training plus hundreds of new officers to keep violent criminals off the streets. Congresswoman Davids has kept us safe. Anyone who says different is just making things up.
Well, joining me now on set, NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray. He's my partner on First Read every morning. Symone Sanders-Townsend, former senior advisor to Vice President Harris and host of Symone on MSNBC, and Republican strategist and former NRCC communications director Matt Gorman. Mark, we had the milk ads where it was, first we had gasoline ads, we had milk ads, now we're having the cop ads on this one. It does, like I say, I know we had an Arizona spot in there. It does feel like it's most impactful in the congressional districts in New York, Oregon, and some parts of California.
Yeah, if you're actually feeling the crime there, or you've actually heard about it on your local news. And Chuck, the other reason that I think that Republicans are turning to this is that this is an issue where they just have the advantage. You look at our own NBC News poll from September, a 30-point advantage. So when you feel like maybe you're on the defensive on an issue like abortion or other things, hey, let's turn to crime, because at least the public buys our message more than the Democratic message.
Matt, you guys are, I think I've seen the phrase cashless bail in, 50 ads. It is astonishing. It feels as if the Republican Party has taken everything that was said in and around the George Floyd protests, and it's in every ad in the country.
Look, when I see those ads that Patrick Maloney's doing or Sharice Davids, I am grinning from ear to ear because I know it's working. That's when when they're responding like that. And look, I'll even say it's bleeding a little bit upward, too, in smaller cities. My old stomping grounds in Northwest Connecticut, they're running ads a lot on crime there. I think it's a toss-up race where it wasn't before. I'll tell you right now, crime, especially also in Pennsylvania, if Oz wins that race, it's going to be on crime. It's bleeding out just beyond those cities, too.
Symone, this feels like, there's some issues that are real issues, that the data backs it up, the economy. What was interesting on the crime issue in our poll is that when you actually ask people, is crime a major problem, minor problem in your area? It wasn't really a minor problem for most people. There's certainly some high-profile examples. Yeah. This feels like a perception problem the Democrats have more than a substance problem?
I think it's a perception problem, but I think if you also ask business owners, frankly, what is a key issue for them in a number
Here
of
in
these
this
top
city,
cities,
they'd say it. Yeah.
In this city, they would say that it is crime. You know, if you live anywhere across the country in a major metropolitan area, I think, and you watch the local news, the perception, I think, is real. It is a concern, even though nationally violent crime is down. I think the reality here is though the Democrats some people have been caught flat-footed, others have not. I mean, you look at Sherry Beasley, very not so flat-footed at all. She's hit back very
Raphael Warnock saw this problem,
exactly.
I'd say a campaign ago. He was on top of this.
He was talking about it. But then you've got other folks who, like Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin, got hit on crime on these ads for 2 weeks before there was a forceful response. And there are some people in Wisconsin that
Did
still
you see it coming? I mean, I don't mean to, like, it was, Symone, it's like finding out the sun rises in the east.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, that one just a head scratcher.
I think that there is strong ground for Democrats to stand on here, and I think Nancy Pelosi was trying to help give congressional Democrats a roadmap. But the reality is that there have been a number of votes. If you were running against an incumbent Republican, there have been a number of votes that Republicans refused to take or voted against in the House. So there's something here.
Let me ask you this: if this is seen as one of the reasons Democrats lose the House, and they don't, is there going to be a big fight between the establishment and the progressive wing? Because it's defund the police, cashless bail, progressive prosecutors that are being tagged to the party.
Right, but I do think how we talk about it matters, right? We talked about this on my show the other day, and the reality is I think the crime conversation is a little bit like the open border conversation right now. Largely, by and large, Democrats don't believe in open borders, right? But because Republicans or my Republican friends are very good at what they do in terms of the messaging, we are having a conversation about immigration.
A couple people at a presidential debate raised their hand.
Crime, exactly. Yeah. We're having the crime conversation as though all Democrats want people to just be running around free. That's not true.
All right. We're all now in get out the vote session, and I got to ask, we're seeing the ex-presidents. Not surprised seeing Barack Obama. What was interesting, Matt, is the Donald Trump schedule. Because we know that Trump is going to places where he's asked, it appears. Sioux City, Iowa, when you look at Grassley's numbers, that actually makes a lot of sense. Latrobe, Pennsylvania, that area of the state makes sense. Miami, I think that feels a different troll. We'll talk about that in a minute. And Vandalia, Ohio, that makes sense. It does seem as if Trump's actually being a team player here.
Yeah, and it goes back to, remember, he didn't go to Virginia during Glenn Youngkin's time, right? They're smarter than you give him credit for. And even they were talking in the Washington Post. He understands where he could be a liability or could be blamed and when he can put the base out.
But the Grassley and Vance stuff is sort of interesting, the fact that he's having to go to Iowa and Ohio this late.
Well, I think part of it's raise the base out, and these are states where it's a red tint. They're not ruby red, even Florida, right? Like it's fairly safe. It's Marco too. He'll win by 5 to 8 points, if not a little more. So it's areas where he could make a difference, but it's not a toss-up.
All right, Mark, let me put up the Obama travel calendar here. It begins tomorrow in Atlanta. He's got Detroit and Milwaukee on Saturday, Las Vegas on Tuesday. There's some cities that are not on here, and I'm questioning I assume it's a yet. Philadelphia would be a yet. Charlotte.
Yeah.
That'll be an
definitely
open question.
There is some reporting that he is going to be doing something with President Biden in Pennsylvania, either in Philly or Pittsburgh. That hasn't been nailed down just yet. But yes, there is kind of an absence on why not North Carolina. Chuck, you and I have had this discussion. Is it better for Democrats to go all in on North Carolina? Or if you are going to win it, do you actually try not to nationalize it and lower? I think there's a legitimate debate on what you end up doing.
Symone, I just think if Barack Obama's going around the country to help turn out, is he not going to campaign for Sherry Beasley?
The question is, did Sherry Beasley's campaign ask? I'm sure that they did.
Wouldn't you assume?
Right, I assume they asked. Who did they ask? Did they ask the DSCC? And then were they the liaison to the Obama team? I could imagine that President Obama sees these numbers. His team sees what is happening and knows that North Carolina is, in fact,
By the way, before you jump in here, Matt, I do want to play. We did a lot of mashups today, and I'm pretty proud of them. Here's the Obama's also cutting TV ads. Take a look.
Wisconsin, you've got a big responsibility this year. Control of the Senate is in your hands. That's why I'm proud to endorse Mandela Barnes, someone with humble roots who understands the challenges folks are facing. Elections are always important, but this year, the future of our country really is on the ballot. And New Hampshire could decide control of the Senate. That's why we have to do everything we can to re-elect Maggie Hassan. So when the fate of our democracy and a woman's right to choose are on the line, I know John will fight for Pennsylvanians. you can count on John Fetterman.
How important, can Obama move the needle here?
I think that turnout is the name of the game here. In many places across the country, early vote has already happened, and early vote is already underway.
Right.
And turnout, people like President Obama. He is exciting for Democrats. And if you go to an Obama rally, you see him in your state, you might catch him at the coffee shop. It might encourage you to go on right over to the polls to your early vote location and cast a ballot for the Democratic candidate.
Matt, what kind of help do you guys worry that Obama's going to provide?
He could increase turnout. I mean, it's depending on where he goes. I mean, look, if again, giving advice, if I were Sherry Beasley, I'd want him to sneak in the weekend before. So that way it couldn't be a huge thing for several days in advance, but he could maybe get a little turnout boost.
A little souls to the poll on
Sunday?
Sunday?
A little bit, but look, I think...
They allow that there?
No, North Carolina, I don't think so.
Yeah.
You know, look, I think he's going to also... get going Republicans, too, just like that.
Just
Trump,
Well, that's the one question I have on Trump. It's sort of like, are you waking people up in Iowa at the wrong time? Right? Like, that's one of those, I don't know.
But those are the states where even if Democrats really turned out, Republicans still have the advantage.
Yep, Chuck, in our poll, though, we did find, and it was just one poll, that African-American enthusiasm is a little bit down. Now, again, it'd be interesting to see what other surveys and our final poll ends up having. But to me, there is that is why former President Obama would actually go in to be able to really fire up African-American voters.
And I noticed he's not in Phoenix yet, and yet he could become a owner of the Phoenix Suns. I would assume Mark Kelly's going to be reminding him of that. Liz Cheney campaigning for Alyssa Slotkin. She said she was going to campaign against election deniers.
Chuck, the perfect realignment of our politics today that we're seeing in real time. And, of course, those of us who followed former Vice President Dick Cheney, his wife Lynn Cheney, and actually now see Liz Cheney going to campaign for Alyssa Slotkin. I mean,
literally the most
the realignment is complete, yes.
Midwestern battleground state. I mean, wow.
Will it make a difference, though? The question is, who is Liz Cheney speaking to, and where is she going, and what is she doing? It doesn't make a difference for base Democrats. Right?
Democrats loving Cheney, I can't really see that.
We don't. We love people standing up for democracy now, but she's a real Republican.
It's really interesting. Her numbers are pretty. They're great with the Democrats, but does it move the needle with the middle? We'll see. This was fun. Thank you, guys. Mark, Matt, and Symone. Up next, Wisconsin's incumbent governor, Tony Evers, speaks to NBC News as he fights for his reelection. And embattled Senate candidate Herschel Walker reacts to some new allegations. We'll have some live reporting from the trail next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Let's hit the trail for a few minutes here. We're 12 days out. There's plenty of action happening every day in these key races. Georgia, Republicans continue to rally around embattled Senate candidate Herschel Walker. He appeared with Republican Senators Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz this morning. A real base strategy that the Walker campaign is embracing here. Marjorie Taylor Greene the other day. All of this after having to deny a new allegation that he encouraged a former partner to pay for an abortion in the early 90s. NBC News has not independently verified these allegations that were first presented at a press conference. Anonymous, the person kept anonymous, but hired the lawyer Gloria Allred yesterday. And in Wisconsin, Democratic Governor Tony Evers campaigned for re-election on the issue of the economy, appearing with President Biden's Labor Secretary Marty Walsh in one of the closest watched races this cycle. And yesterday, his Republican challenger Tim Michels stumped with Virginia Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin, who's become a pretty popular guest on the national campaign trail for governors around the country. Ellison Barber is in Monroe, Georgia, following the Walker campaign. Shaq Brewster is up in Wisconsin, where he actually just talked to Governor Evers. And that's where we will begin, Mr. Brewster. You ran into Governor Evers. I have found, of all the races, I just want to frame this up a little bit. If you're looking for a canary in the coal mine on Joe Biden's reelect, I always look at Tony Evers. Here's a guy who won essentially the same way Biden won, by not being the other guy. This was Evers beats Walker, and now he's got to run on his own. Biden beats Trump, and he's got to prepare to run on his own. Evers is kind of a quiet guy. Biden's kind of a quiet guy. What did you see? What did he say to you?
The one other factor I'll throw in there, Chuck, is the fact that they're dealing with Republican legislature, that strong Republican legislature here in this state. So not having a Congress or a legislative body that would actually work with the governor. So you're seeing that dynamic here as well. But, you know, one thing to note here in Wisconsin, I spoke with Governor Tony Evers today as he was out starting his bus tour. And yesterday I spoke with Tim Michels. And the one similarity that you hear is that they're nationalizing this race for different reasons. For Tim Michels, it's because this will send a national message of Democratic leadership in some of these states and how Republicans can win in a state like this, talking about him being a businessman and some of his economic proposals. For Tony Evers, it's about things like abortion and voting rights and the national implications of what will happen here in Wisconsin if a Republican takes over the governor's mansion. So both of them acknowledge that this is getting high national attention, and that goes into why we're seeing all of those national figures. Yesterday, Elizabeth Warren, Glenn Youngkin. Today, Secretary Marty Walsh, and then on Saturday, former President Barack Obama. And that is something I asked about with Governor Tony Evers. What does he hope to get from that? Listen to a little bit of that exchange. What do you hope to get from the former President Obama's visit?
Well, he's always right on. I mean, we had him 4 years ago, and he was outstanding. And people will be energized, and they understand what a great world leader he is. And I expect that we're going to get more people out to vote. That's the bottom line. This race is close, and the more people that we get out to vote, the best chances we have to win.
Look, part of this is about the timing. This weekend is the first weekend of early and in-person voting. Already more than 350,000 people have already cast their ballot. So it's about driving turnout, and that's something you're seeing on both sides of the aisle, Chuck.
Shaquille Brewster catching up on that bus tour with Governor Evers. Shaq, thank you. Let's move down to Georgia. That's where we find Ellison Barber. She's covering the Walker campaign. And I keep coming back to, you know, Ellison, we had a new allegation yesterday. It is fascinating to me who Walker is keeping company with, not just who's keeping company with Walker, but who Walker's keeping company with in a battleground state. People that you wouldn't normally associate with swing voters. Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah, I mean, look, they really seem to be leaning into having some of the big names in the National Republican Party come on the campaign trail with them. And I have to tell you, even in the last, 24 hours, we are seeing this increase of energy, if you will, at a lot of Walker's events. They are people who were already going to vote for him to begin with. They already are voting Republican. Most of the people we speak to, they say they will vote straight ticket. But they are excited by hearing from someone like Senator Graham or Senator Cruz, and they are coming out. And we saw two events today that Walker had, one here in Monroe, another in Cumming, Georgia. It's midday, a weekday, and each of these events had over 200 people, which is not nothing, particularly given that it is a weekday. And one thing that I find interesting when you listen to the speeches that these national Republicans are making, right? They're not necessarily trying to reach out to the independents, the small sliver of perhaps swayable voters, but what they are drilling down on is the importance for Republicans to get out and vote right now. And the argument that we keep hearing from Senator Graham when he is on the campaign trail with Herschel Walker is he says, I'm tired of my vote being canceled out by your two Democratic senators here. So they make this big picture argument of if we want bigger change, if we want control, that's why you have to vote for this guy versus going into specific policies that make Herschel Walker a unique candidate that they should support. It's very much this national level of we need to take control of the Senate, and this is the way to do it, and that's why we are here.
And I guess, Ellison, what I'm so focused on this is that it seems as if the Walker campaign has made a bet that if they just drive up base turnout, they can get a big enough number to force a runoff. It's almost as if they've abandoned a strategy to get to 50%.
Yeah, it's interesting because in some ways it does seem like they are hyper-focused at this point on turning out the vote among their supporters. A dark horse in this race is the Libertarian candidate Chase Oliver, who in internal polling for Herschel Walker's campaign has consistently been polling 4 to 5% in recent weeks, taking away voters that would go to Herschel Walker. But in terms of those kind of swayable voters, I don't think we are seeing as much of an aggressive reach out, if you will, on Herschel Walker's side. You are seeing them kind of really cater to the base here and trying to generate enthusiasm. And I have been surprised in recent days by how many people at Herschel Walker events have told me that they have gone out and voted early because they think it's important to do that and encourage their friends to vote as well, even if they say typically we're election day voters.
Yeah, it sort of raises the question, is Georgia a swing state with swing voters, or is Georgia a swing state because it's so polarized? I guess the Herschel Walker theory of the case is it's a swing state because it's polarized. We shall see. Ellison Barber, fascinating report. Thank you. Before we go to break, we have a bit of breaking news as a federal judge has just handed down one of the longest sentences yet to a January 6 rioter, sentencing Albuquerque Head, who dragged D.C. police officer Michael Fanone into the crowd, to a 7.5-year prison sentence. Prosecutors had been asking for an 8-year sentence, so they almost got everything they asked for. Head will get credit for about 18 months that he's already spent in custody. Judge Amy Berman Jackson called Head's actions, quote, some of the darkest acts committed on one of our nation's darkest days. Officer Fanone suffered a heart attack and traumatic brain injury in that attack. He wound up resigning from the D.C. Police Department. After the break, control of Congress is on the line, and it could all come down to a handful of competitive districts. I'm going to talk to the Democratic nominee running in one of the closest congressional races in the country. North Carolina's 13th. That's next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. If somehow the tide turns again and there's a single-digit margin this November for control of the House of Representatives, it all could come down to a few toss-up districts. And one of them that fits into the swingiest of swing categories is a fairly new district that may only exist for a cycle. It's North Carolina's 13th district. Democrat Wiley Nickel, Republican Bo Hines, they're battling for a district that stretches from Raleigh out into more rural areas outside of Raleigh. Let's give you a taste of the ad messaging that's driving this race. Democratic ads against Hines paint him as an anti-abortion, anti-cop extremist.
Bo Hines supports a national ban on abortion. I know how unsafe that would be because I had an abortion before Roe v. Wade.
Bo Hines is dangerous. Hines wants to defund the FBI. And Hines sides with extremists over the cops who defended our Capitol on January 6th.
And the ads supporting Hines tie Nickel to Democratic leadership and the country's economic woes.
Remember when you could afford gas, groceries, and electricity? When store shelves were stocked? When children were educated, not indoctrinated? When our borders were secure, our streets safe, and our economy was healthy? Ordinary Americans can't fuel their cars, heat their homes, or feed their families. And thanks to Joe Biden, it's still getting worse.
I'm joined now by the Democratic nominee for North Carolina's 13th district, Wiley Nickel. Mr. Nickel, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Chuck.
So let me start with what was our lead today, because I look at your ads. You're hitting them on issues like threats to democracy, abortion rights. The ads hitting you are hitting you on the economy. And it looks like nationally, Democrats are trying to help provide some better air cover for candidates like yourself on the economy. You tell me, how acute is this economic situation in your district?
I mean, the economy is always the top issue in any election. That's my job as a state senator, and someone who's worked for 2 White Houses, to make sure we have a healthy economy. And, in our race, we're talking about that all the time. And frankly, Washington is just not working for North Carolina families. We got to do so much more to bring down those costs. Mm-hmm. The cost of housing, the cost of healthcare, the cost of groceries and gas at the pump. But, our campaign's talking about solutions. We have a 30-point inflation action plan visible on our website. The other side, all I hear is complaining about the issue, right, and plans to cut Social Security and Medicare. That's not going to work for folks in this district.
You said something in your statement there. You said Washington is just not working well for folks in your district. Someone's going to say, well, the Democrats are in control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. So if you're not happy with how Washington works, why should they vote for you?
What I am talking about is partisan gridlock. I want to go to Washington, Chuck, to stand up to the extremes in both parties, to do what's right for our state. We don't have enough people who go to Washington to work across the aisle and deliver results for their district. And in this race, you've got a clear contrast. As a state senator, I've, worked to do what's the right thing, whether it's a Republican idea or a Democratic idea. And on the other side, we have a far-right extremist. You don't see people like my opponent in a 50-50 race like this. Mm-hmm. The Madison Cawthorns and Marjorie Taylor Greens, they usually stay in those Republican plus 20 districts. But this one is really unique because we have a 27-year-old trust fund kid who's never had a job, running as someone who's 100% pro-Trump. He wants to go to Congress to be a MAGA warrior, and folks are tired of the far right and the far left extremists. That's the message that I think you're going to see out of this district on election night.
A lot of Democrats nationally are trying to figure out, you've got a unique district here that's a little bit suburban and a little bit rural. Democrats have really had a problem winning over voters in rural areas. What are you learning from this process in this district? And what do you think is the best way for Democrats to talk to rural voters?
Well, number one, it starts with showing up. I was just in Harnett County talking with farmers, Democrats, Republicans, Independents yesterday. But this district is what districts should look like. This was a district that was gerrymandered by the courts for competition. It's a 50-50 seat, and that's what they wanted it to be, so that you have the best ideas winning. And there's just so few seats that are like this. I mean,
Are you meeting swing voters? I'm curious, because this district, the district fascinates me because of that. I actually think we got to be careful being angry at gerrymandering. The only way to get competitive districts might be to gerrymander. But let me ask you this. Are you finding swing voters, or is this just a perfectly 50-50 district between Team Red and Team Blue?
No, I mean, this is not your, typical Republican, kind of, Democrat kind of race. I'm somebody who's worked, with both parties as a senator, and we have a far right extremist. So, if you're looking for the race where you have, a normal Republican, this isn't it. This is somebody that, our opponent at least is somebody who is far, out of the mainstream on the issues that matter in this district. And, we're talking about the economy, but we're also talking about women's rights. Got an opponent who wants a federal ban on abortion with no exceptions. That's absolutely out of step with the values of this district, whether it's urban, suburban, or rural.
Tactically, do you feel like the Democratic Party has given you enough resources, given Sherry Beasley enough resources in North Carolina?
Yeah, absolutely. We are, doing very well in this district. We are ahead in a seat that, elected Donald Trump in 2016, but voted for Joe Biden in 2020 because, we've been talking about bringing our country together, changing the tone in Washington. You just don't have enough folks who talk about that and want to go to Washington to do that.
How awkward is it that this is basically a district that's only going to live for a year? The courts drew it, or do you hope it doesn't? Do you hope that maybe, hey, you like this 50-50 district, keep it?
I think this is what every district should look like. Gerrymandered for competition. This is a great thing, and what the maps look like in 2 years is going to be up to the voters in this election. And we've got two incredibly important races for the Supreme Court that I think will determine whether, we have fair maps for the next, decade in North Carolina.
In the final days, do you need a President Biden? Do you want former President Obama? Would you like to see them in Raleigh? Do you think that helps?
Anyone who wants to help us win, we want them to be here. We've had a ton of great support in this race, though. Last week, we had Congressman Jim Clyburn from South Carolina campaigning for me. We have an incredibly popular, governor in Roy Cooper who's been campaigning with me. So we're not lacking for folks, coming out to talk about, why this race is so important. And it's close. Every vote is really going to matter in this one. So we're trying to hit that message as much as we can.
Well, I'm glad I had a few minutes with you. I watched so many TV ads of all of these campaigns. If you watch all the TV ads and that's all you did, you wouldn't vote for anybody these days. Anyway, Wiley Nickel, Democrat in the 13th Congressional District of North Carolina. Thanks for coming on and spending a few minutes.
Thanks so much, Chuck.
And of course, we have and will continue to reach out to his opponent, Bo Hines. Still to come, the MeToo movement and Gen Z, how social media has changed the fight over feminism. We're going to have a look at the reporting behind this week's season finale of Meet the Press Reports after a quick break. Welcome back. It has been 5 years since the start of the hashtag MeToo movement, when groundbreaking reporting on sexual abuse and harassment at the hands of Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein set off a wave of women sharing their own experiences with workplace sexual harassment and abuse. In this week's Meet the Press Reports, we dive into the legacy of that moment and the movement and how Gen Z, who was coming of age when this began, is having to conduct themselves in a post-MeToo world. In tonight's episode, my colleague Savannah Sellers sat down with Rosanna Arquette, one of the first Weinstein accusers, and some Gen Z college students. Take a listen.
So when you just think about the fact that it's been 5 years since the start of the Me Too movement. What's just your first reaction to that, 5 years passing?
Galvanized the movement amongst globally around the world for women and all survivors. I'm proud of it. Look where we are now. So much work to do, but it was a really important time in our world. It was a seminal moment in contemporary history.
Days after Arquette made her accusation, the hashtag MeToo took off on Twitter, and people around the world shared their own experiences of harassment and assault. It seemed to impact all industries, and it seemed to make real progress. According to a New York Times analysis in 2018, the Me Too movement brought down 201 powerful men, and nearly half of their replacements were women.
The younger generation, you are much wiser. You have a lot more than what we had now, the tools to take it to the next level, and please do.
So we wanted to know, 5 years in, what impact did this huge cultural moment and movement have on the generation to follow in its wake? We talked to students from coast to coast, and it turns out, for Gen Z, Me Too is kind of a so what.
Do you think the Me Too movement did something substantial?
It's like we only heard about Me Too when celebrities were involved.
These young women at Coastal Carolina University say, in many ways, things haven't really changed.
It was never Me Too when, something happened on a college campus. It wasn't Me Too when someone just went to work at a regular corporate office. It's not Me Too when maybe it's a black man saying that he was assaulted.
When domestic violence and sexual assault and different crimes happen on college campuses, I think they are lessened in a way. I think that you're told you shouldn't go out, with your girls, or you shouldn't dress like this.
But then something happens, and you can't say Me Too, because nobody's going to listen.
So to you, it really didn't have much impact on your life?
Absolutely not. It couldn't have. If it did, wow, okay, someone doing something for black women, that's even hard to believe there. That's shocking. I would be jumping for joy if Me Too would have done anything, but
Well, Savannah Sellers joins me now. Savannah, look, I think your report was outstanding. The entire episode that my team put together, I'm very pleased with it. Let me ask you this: 5 years ago, where did you think we would be today?
Absolutely. Well, first, Chuck, thank you. You're the boss. So that's good to hear that you're happy with that. I appreciate it. And it was incredible to really get to dive in on this. I mean, look, I was surprised by what I heard here. I talk to Gen Z. I have a show on Snapchat. I do the news for Gen Z. I'm in a constant conversation with them. And I thought 5 years in that they would have felt like the world had changed in such a way where them saying something, like something happened to me on my college campus, they would be believed. And they just simply didn't feel that way. I asked some questions to kind of understand, maybe were you so young when this started, or maybe you were shielded from it, that they didn't really understand ways in which it had changed. And they did give a little bit. Sure, we hear people talking about their experiences on platforms like TikTok, and maybe we would not have before, but I still don't feel believed. And something else that I thought was interesting is those women that you saw there, as well as the several others, and in the full piece tonight, there's quite a few other students, they were from all sides of the political spectrum. They have totally different beliefs in a lot of ways, but they all felt this way about this particular topic.
5 years ago, we were talking about the physical workplace experiences. I think what, to me, was the most alarming part of your report is how the threat has shifted in the blurred world, particularly for Gen Z. Online and physical life all go together. And the online world is more misogynistic, not less, than it was 5 years ago.
And it's terrifying, Chuck. And as you said, we'll get into this tonight, and I think it's really going to shock some people. There is content online, as we get into in the piece, that does things like normalizes rape. These videos have billions with a B of views. These hashtags have billions with a B of views. And there's these different groups online that some of our viewers might not have ever heard of. There's what's called a pickup artist. What they do is they make content online that they're hoping that women see that demoralizes women, that criticizes them so that a woman's confidence is undermined, and therefore it's easier for them to pick them up, as their name suggests. Incels is something that somebody may have heard of before, but what that stands for is involuntary celibate. And essentially what that is that's men online who are upset about their rejection by women, and then find this sort of united community, that is what it is online, of similar people who have been rejected and then are united in their rage. And what's really scary about that is we've seen violence from that spill over into real life. And we do have somebody in the piece who kind of fell down that rabbit hole. He tells us how, he tells us why, and also how he got out of it.
Savannah, as I said, this is not a history. This is not a story that looks backwards. This is a story that's looking forwards. And hopefully it sounds the alarm that we got a bigger problem we got to deal with when it comes to the online world. Anyway, Savannah, thank you so much. Catch more of Savannah's reporting tonight. Watch the season finale of this season's Meet the Press Reports. It's tonight. It's on NBC News Now. You can then stream it on demand starting tomorrow on Peacock or wherever you get NBC News programming. Hallie Jackson picks up News Now coverage right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.